monochromatic portrait. So that means one color with water to lighten it and black to darken it. So I showed you guys at the beginning of class the finished example of this guy here, right? Used blue through the whole, you don't have to use a realistic color. If you want a more realistic effect, burnt sienna and the dark umber brown that you can use. Not great skin tone, but at least some fairly realistic skin tone if you want to try to have it realistic and less, green or blue or red. Okay, so sometimes like using an unusual color doesn't look bad when you use an unusual color. Obviously, it still looks like a person. So step one is to pick your photo, and then you don't have to hand draw face. What we're gonna do is use something called Graphite Transfer to move the face onto the piece of watercolor paper. So this is obviously quite a bit bigger than my watercolor paper. So what I'm gonna do up on two edges, and then I'm going to put my photo that those same two edges are aligned, and now I know it'll be on the paper. I'm just going to use two paper clips. And now what I'm going to do is use, it doesn't matter what you use, you can use a pencil, you can use a color, you can use a ballpoint pen. Honestly, you don't even need to be writing, you can just have a mechanical pencil. And you're going to trace. This graphite paper needs to go darker down. So you can see that I've looked at it. I dyed, this one's particularly darker. There's a different kind over there that's a little bit like gray and darker gray. They both work. And now all I'm doing is tracing the image. Because we're tracing an image, we want to make sure that we're using a copyright-free photograph. So in your folder that you had to choose from came from org file. It's the photographer's name, Anil. He's a street photographer, which means he doesn't have a studio. It's people on the street. And he's donated his photos to Morgue Fest. Before too far, right? So I think I've got his whole hat in his ear. I'm gonna make sure transfer paper the right way around, right? So, and make sure I'm pressing hard enough. I made it a little lighter. I'm getting really dark lines. So, like moving forward now, the one thing I need to make sure that I do is be for every detail. Okay, so that I'm not just one line for something that needs two. I'm oftentimes very lightly also where some of the shadows stop because it does make it easier later to paint. Including details in my transfer process. That's like guesswork for me later as a painter. I drew that super lightly. It's gonna barely be on my paper, but that's totally great. Don't need some of the detail things. I don't want to actually, and it will to deal with. I cannot draw all of the hair. Like I don't want to just scribble. I don't want to draw all these details in his top. With that, in a number of different ways later, like by using a color crayon to make some gridded patterns, using salt. Like it doesn't have to be this exact pattern painting. So I don't want to get hung up in those sorts of details. Really confusing later on. I also, when I get to his hair, I'm going to identify this outer edge of where his hair is. Trying to like just follow, rather than make, I'm sort of trying to follow the bulk of where his beard is. And I'll show you how we'll make individual hairs. And we won't do very many of them actually. So I'm just kind of tracing his beard is, right? And then any shadows that are there. So this is a much more regular line here at the top of his beard than at the bottom. I think where I take my paper clips off, I did not trace here. So that's a good one. Before I take my paper clips off, because there's no way to line it back up, I want to make sure that I have all of the detail I need, okay? I don't want to move this off here and then be stuck later. So I feel like I got a pretty good transfer of what I'll need to draw the back of his t-shirt here, but it kind of gets lost in the dark, so I don't know that I'll need it anyway. The transfer paper and the paper clips can go back. There's a bucket of paper clips and the transfer paper, so they can go back there.